Thank you, Sharif.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you. I realize that Navaid and I have a big challenge, actually a threefold challenge this morning. First is to follow up such a fantastic and esteemed guest and wonderful job, Paris, facilitating that. So we're following a rock star, right? It's a challenge. Challenge number two is we are the only thing keeping you from lunch. It's the worst place to be. And third, Navaid and I, we're friends decades at this point. We're ambitious folks, and we have a lot we'd like to cover. But the most important thing we'd like to do is not only provide each of you with hopefully some ideas, some inspiration, maybe some tools and things that you could take with you and apply to your situation, but also you'll be able to provide to us feedback on ways as an organization we can better serve you. So we're looking at today as being sort of day one of a journey, and we're going to be asking all of you with surveys, et cetera, afterwards to let us know where do we want to dive deeper. It's going to go fast, and so just bear with us. We're going to try to make it as interactive as possible, and at the same time, I'm getting hungry, you probably are too. Fair enough? All right. So thinking about a successful startup, and by the way, throwing the trademark on it makes it sound really authoritative. There are many different ways to tackle this type of a topic, but thinking through what does it take in order to go from being an idea to a successful startup is really a journey, and it's really about imperfect information and imperfect execution and improvement each step of the way. So it starts off with an idea. It should solve a problem. Pretty simple, right? But defining that problem properly is a very difficult and really an ongoing sort of a journey. Also, it should leverage big trends. That's something that Navaid and I have as point of view, and we're going to spend the bulk of our time talking about trends and the implications of these trends. So each of you can be thinking about applying that to whatever business you're in now or whatever business you might be considering for yourself in the future. Then we're going to just put a very superficial, quick hit on some building blocks of that business, of the things that you'll want to solve for as you go forward. And really the takeaway here is, look, there's typically three different versions of this. There's business plan 1.0, which is enough to feel comfortable to invest yourself, your time, and some money into it. Right? Just enough to get going. I've got a great idea. I got to get started somehow. And there's a lot of assumptions. About 6 months into it, you start to realize all those things that you had no idea about. You just absolutely had no clue that you had to take care of this or it would require that. And so you have to throw that out. And business plan 2.0 might look very different from 1.0, but you've learned something and you've refined it. Business plan 2.0, if you're exceptionally lucky, you just keep going. I don't know of many examples, but that's the one where you live with it for 12, 18 months, and now you've had feedback from the market. Now your customers are telling you what they actually value, how they value it, how they want to be receiving what you're bringing to them, and you come up with business plan 3.0. We're going to hear from other folks later on today that are at that 3.0 stage. 3.0 stage is really the one that gets you excited, that you hear about in Fast Company. You hear these fantastic numbers on financial raises, et cetera, so that ultimately you can graduate and you no longer tell people, I'm part of a startup, I'm a company. So we're going to dive right into ideas real fast, and Navaid's going to be the one helping us talk through this big, important topic.
So, first of all, I just want to say how honored I am to be part of this group of people. And it's incredibly humbling to be among peers, among mentors, among the next generation of incredibly talented people that are coming up. And it gives me hope. And when we started this chapter 3 years ago, restarted it 3 years ago, it's going to be fourth year next year. There were pretty dark times where 3 or 4 of us would have meetings every month, and we'd invite folks and only 3 or 4 people would show up, sometimes even 2 or 3. And then from that to come to having, this is our 5th event that has over 100 people. And so just incredible progress on our organization, the first annual conference. And one of the biggest problems any volunteer organization has is that it tends to become about a few personalities, and as soon as those personalities step back, the organization collapses. And that's how previous chapters of Open Chicago have struggled with it. And the biggest test of this was to create a platform where the community feels empowered, they're part of it, you're the stakeholders, and enough people from that experience take ownership of this process that, and enough people are collectively involved that it becomes a self-sustaining organization. And I'm just extremely proud of the fact that this year we held elections and HAR has stepped up and a group of new volunteers have stepped up and they've done an incredible job of pulling this together. And it's not just not same set of exact people who are all doing this. So it's just, I think we have a great future. And
now to the problems.
And now, so this, when we're looking at just stepping back, if you look at the global progress created by commerce and entrepreneurship, it's been absolutely incredible what's happened in the past century, right? I mean, we are no longer facing mass hunger and problems of mass starvation, people just dying from these common diseases. All of that is mostly taken care of. And US is 6.5 times on average wealthier it was at the beginning of the century. A lot of places in the developing world, like Pakistan, it's close to 50 times from where they started, just with nothing to now my parents' driver has an AC in their house. And so it's just incredible where this progress is happening globally. But at the same time, when you look at what's happening, with the rise of the internet and global connectivity, it was supposed to be, education was supposed to dispel ignorance. It was supposed to be, information empowers us. It was supposed to be that connectivity brings us together. And at the same time, it seems that ignorance is increasing. It may seem like that. And that even though we are connected, we're so disconnected from each other that we've just polarized world apart. And with cheaper information from the internet, there's just so much disinformation that you cannot even tell the truth. And this unemployment, but not just unemployment in America, but around the world, it's a lot of people are not participating. They're not even looking for employment. And so like 3 times as many people in America right now are not looking for a job as it was just 4 decades ago. And when people are not needed, there's a great article from Dalai Lama yesterday in the New York Times. It is the lack of being needed that creates discontent and the type of anger that you're seeing and pain that's resulting. And these trends are all over us, and even in what's happening around in the Muslim world, part of these big trends and forces that are shaping our future, unless you understand that, and we can create new businesses, new ideas that can bridge these gaps. These are the big problems of humanity going forward. And new ideas are needed to actually solve these problems. And so we're going to go into some of these ideas for what are these forces shaping us, and we're going to show how they impact everybody, and the biggest company and the companies that are represented here today, how they're shaped by these forces.
So as a group of folks who are gathered, because in some way each of us wants to make an impact, right? The theme of this conference. We think about these things, right, individually, and we think about it collectively. These are the problems. So as entrepreneurs, as people looking to make an impact, this is sort of the first place to start. The best definition I ever heard of an entrepreneur is somebody who sees the world as they think it should be, and it drives them crazy until they can find a way to make that world happen. And they're going to bring everyone along with them, right? So that's what we're talking about here. We're aware of these, but we're aware of these because we're problem solvers, right? We don't lament, we take action. We figure out what is the problem we want to solve, and how can we solve it?
So we're going to just talk through some of these trends. Some of them are really obvious, but at the same time, when we're not actually in our daily lives, we may not actually think about these. But the first one is the rise of the information age and the impact of computers. So when you start off in the 1974, there's about 10,000 transistors, and it's gotten to about 10 billion transistors. My latest workstation at work has about 100 cores in it. And with the latest Intel P processors, we've got quad of those, and it's incredible. Just 2 decades ago, that would be the power of a supercomputer. And another, when you fast forward, if this doubling of computing power continues, according to Moore's law, that type of computer is going to fit into your cell phone in the next decade. And it's incredible what that is going to unleash, because with that type of computing power, the ability to crunch and power new type of intelligence, solve new type of problems, is going to emerge, which currently doesn't exist. And it enables new type of businesses to exist. Next is IoT. And you can see how all of this is going to be talked about all through the day today. And this is all the devices that are connected to the internet. And each one of these trends is going to create positive change. If you're on the side of it, that you're accelerating with this, you're going to go up with this. Or if you're on the wrong side of it, you're going to be swept away. And IoT is the number of connected devices on the internet started with about a handful just 3 decades ago, and now they're projecting something like 6 billion devices are connected, and it's going to explode to 22 billion. Eventually, we'll have our devices within us that are connected to externally, even biosensing devices, our healthcare devices, and even implants within us are connected and communicating.
So everybody know what IoT, just to make sure. So
Internet of Things.
Internet of Things, right? And the idea there is things are able to be connected so that you can leverage more different points of interaction. And those points of interaction, if you even think about it in human terms, the more people you can get in a room and brainstorm, as long as there's a way to control that in an effective way, you get a better outcome. Internet of Things is sort of that same notion, but about things. And when you add to that the computing power that Navaid shared earlier, you're talking about speed and the ability to ask questions you didn't even have the ability to ask before. So those are the first two big trends. Questions, thoughts, real quick? Okay.
Yeah. So this is where a lot of stuff is converging, and this is the biggest disruptive phenomenon. This is artificial intelligence. So if you see the graph on the right, it's a little, what it is the number of jobs that are associated with different type of manual and cognitive routine and non-cognitive routine tasks. Cognitive routine tasks are the type of things that, the manual tasks is what the simple robots are able to replicate. And that's basically starting from the Industrial Revolution, as those tasks, even the more complex ones, with this rise of automation, they're able to just basically get automated, they're able to get moved to other parts of the world. AI and traditional software has been replacing routine cognitive tasks. So stuff that is basically that you can just turn into a formula or set of routines or if-then logic, that's what traditional software is able to basically take over. However, with this AI, it is non-routine cognitive tasks where there's deep patterns that are available, and you'll see industry after industry, from healthcare to basically finance to any industry, transportation, it is getting massively disrupted with this rise of artificial intelligence. And with the rise of computing power, we're just over here at the curve where computers take over the ability for humans to compete. And they've taken over in specific domains like chess and stuff like that. And it may not be general intelligence for a while, but any specific subdomains are much more likely to take over within the next 10 years. And we're looking at things like self-driving cars that would be safer. And even if they're not completely self-driving, you'll see fly-by-wire. So just like how planes, the pilot is not actually moving that physically. Currently, we physically move the car through hydraulics. That is all going to change with, you say car, go right, but there's another car over there, the car will say no. It won't actually follow your instructions. But you'll see a combination of this complete intelligence and integrated intelligence that's going to emerge, and it's going to basically become part of a thing, but it also has ability to disrupt more than half the current knowledge jobs. So there's one thing that Salman was talking about, the intelligence, the more smaller domain your task or knowledge is, and routine your tasks are, then the more likely they will get swept away in the next decade.
I think, first of all, I'm glad to see that the slope is still upward on the human performance line. I'm not sure if it's a straight line all the time. But as Navaid was saying, think if you just use this as a thought experiment, right? If we are going towards self-driving cars, what challenges and what opportunities does that open up? If you have a self-driving car, does the car have to look the same and be shaped the same? If not, what would uniquely need to be added to that car? Is there a business opportunity to be the supplier of a little small piece of a widget that never was needed before, and if I can get in there for $5 on each car, nobody's going to want to compete with me because there's no reason to compete on a $5 widget, but I'm first, I win, right? That's how fortunate I'm made. Do you need street signs? How do you handle pedestrians, right? All of these are questions to be asking about this trend that could point to opportunities. Each of those problems has a solution and it needs us to help it be solved.
And the impact it has on industry by industry. So, for example, if you just go to, there's 17 million driving jobs in the US. So there's connectedness, there's an Uberization of driving jobs, and then once the self-driving cars come, then even that would get completely disrupted. The next big impact or trend, force, or what we call it, is trust. So back in the ancient times, trust was a very tribal thing. Either you were part of a tribe that protected you, or you got killed. You got fed to the animals, or some other tribe basically pushed you aside, and you didn't get anything. So the tribe is what basically created the social bond of trust. As we moved into the age of institutions, this is what has created the greatest civilizations, and the trust in the institutions allowed us to get to where we are today. Because individually or small class can't do stuff, it's the institutions that allow us to carry forth our values and embody that in a society. But what's happening is our trust in institutions and brands is declining. And it's not just declining, it's eroding as rapidly as anything else, because I think it's as low as it peaked in 1970s or something like that. Now it's as low as it was during the Great Depression, when basically people did not trust any institution. And part of that reason is because the people who are holding up these institutions themselves have conflicts of interest, and they look out for their interest and basically screw everybody else over. And so there's the self-interest that overtake our ability to act as agents for the role that we're in. And you've seen one scandal after the other, from the government to large banks to big brands that have eroded the trust of people. And as that trust is eroded, what's happening is new type of business models are showing up. So initially, things like the e-commerce, where people are like, who would trust transacting on the internet? Just 15 years ago, that was a fundamental question. Now nobody even thinks about it. And eBay and stuff like that. But think about LinkedIn. Just 15 years ago, all hires, or something like 70-80% of hires were just done internal, and it's very few people actually got hired through job ads. But with LinkedIn, there's a disruption, and LinkedIn and other type of online things where they start hiring has now progressively moved to online based, and that's increasing. That's a matter of trust. But now you can think of social trust. So what does Airbnb and Uber have? Like just 10 years ago, if you told me, oh, I'm going to let a stranger into my house, I would say no way, or I would want a stranger's house. I mean, no way. I'd never sit or sleep in some stranger's bed. That would boggle my mind. But with this Airbnb, with this social trust collective rating system, now that trust is being extended through these platforms. And this is basically one institution after other where there's conflicts of interest, from insurance to finance to healthcare. The barrier of this trust is being flipped on its head through new business models. For example, Navaid, basically, as soon as they're an insurance company that is usually applying behavioral economics to flip the equation of trust, instead of this insurance company being incentivized to not pay you when you get an event, bad event that happens, they basically go the other way around. And link it up. Next Capital, we're operating in the finance industry to basically build trust by having flat fees and enable large institutions to operate in this space. Healthcare, as I said, again, the Moore's law applied to healthcare. That's Moore's law trend of the cost of sequencing DNA, and you can see the cost is falling in faster, but it's not just over here. You can see in everything from radiology to this wide range of healthcare science, where instead of healthcare being based on these individual data points, now there's mass personalized data about every single person that's coming on due to these health apps that's going to dramatically change how and the way we think about health. Let's go to globalization. There's a lot of talk in the political environment. Anti-globalization, that's just talk, because globalization is not reversing. What's happening is we are becoming integrated with services, goods, and money. If you can see how goods are transferring, money is transferring, all global markets are becoming more correlated over time as we become a tighter rural village. If you look at the right side, it's like this. Now you're talking about self-driving car. That's a self-driving ship that goes to a completely automated port that puts all the stuff into a completely automated warehouse. And so when we're talking about global supply chain, this is where it's going. Supply of services globally. You can have teams all over the world, and so money, talent, and goods, it's all flowing together. The other big thing is demographics. So you hear about these baby boomers, and you may have not actually seen why it's called that. So there's an actual hump of people who are this 45 to 60-year-old. That's the richest generation in the history of the world. They've got more money collectively than any group of people in the history of humanity. And that money is mostly sitting in real estate as the primary asset, and then in 401k or DB plans, and that $5 trillion has moved from 401k and DB plans, pension plans, into IRAs just over the past 6 years. Another 12 trillion is moving over the next decade or so. And so my company is involved in trying to protect those people and provide them better services to help them plan for retirement. But apart from that, you see a number of these successful healthcare entrepreneurs. Each one of them, most of them, I think, are capitalizing on the greater healthcare needs of these people, because their health is failing. And there a lot more of these services are needed for a lower cost for these people, because this group of people is going to bankrupt this country, because the healthcare cost is going to rise exponentially to service the demand to access the new advanced technologies of healthcare. This
We
is
just had a couple more of these, so we
Yes.
told you we'd go.
so this we're going through pretty fast, right? Each one of these could be a lecture on its own, right? So solar, okay, so we all worry about the cost of gas going up and down, fracking and all of that stuff, but the biggest news is solar. And the cost, so the efficiency of solar in terms of the watts per square foot or something like that, it's only double. But, so it's not quite followed anymore as well. However, the cost is following something called Swanson's law, and it's actually falling faster than Moore's law would predict. And what's happening is it's happening, like it's going in faster than half every 2 years, and the practical implication of this is this year, the cost of solar dropped below the cost of oil, even though the cost of oil has dropped a lot. And if this continues, this trend, then you could have, with just 4 or 5 doublings, the cost of solar causing energy costs to reduce to 1/10, 100, and so energy could become ubiquitous, and it could supply all the energy that we possibly need very soon. It has a dramatic impact on all equations. If you go to the next slide, for example, if you look at food and water, cost of desalination. So just think about what water means. Pakistan and India have water tables that are falling 1% every year. How many of you have heard of Indus Valley civilization? Right, a few people, right? So apparently, the Indus Valley civilization, the word Hindu and Hindus all comes from the word Indus. And the civilization existed like 5,000 years ago, but it was eradicated because of global change of climate. And the river dried up and the people had to move away. And Pakistan and India's water tables are dropping dramatically. Every year there's less and less water. If you've got, and it's unsustainable to support that population, but if you've got water costs falling exponentially with, and because with energy, that's going to be even cheaper. You can desalinate water and pump it as far as you like. That changes dramatically the area of land in the world that can become irrigable and that can actually produce food. So all of this is turning into a data science. So how do we combine this?
You're right. So thank you for your patience. And there's other trends you could probably think of as well. The key is to recognize a trend and then think about how that can affect or be impacted by whatever it is you're trying to solve for. So what we thought we'd do is we threw together this quick table. The takeaway is this. The successful startup is going to be taking advantage or riding along with multiple trends in most cases. It is very rare and it's not necessarily advisable to try to start your own trend. That will get you rockstar status. They will make a biopic movie of you and your life. But for the rest of us, it's better to figure out what's already happening and ride along. So we thought we would throw this up there. There's some of our other companies that are represented in which of these trends they're using. Next Capital, Navaid, you want to just give a quick
So the type of stuff we're doing, we're creating mass personalized financial services. So, and this goes to everything that Salman was saying earlier, where from being a product-oriented P&G and Johnson Johnson type of focus, and then financial services product-oriented financial institutions, we're moving into a world where we have on-demand personalization and customization of services and goods. But for that, you need mass amount of data about the person and massive amount of computing power. So the type of stuff that we're doing, we've created a $50 million financial infrastructure that scales on the cloud. It combines AI and advanced financial economics and allows some of the largest financial institutions to partner with us and take our services to personalize their products to the specific needs of individuals. And so, like 4 or 5 of these partners that have partnered with Next Capital combined have about $2 trillion that they have access to. That either they custody or they manage. So the type of global impact that this type of stuff has is just absolutely incredible. We are at the nexus of these 4 or 5 of these large trends, but you can see all the speakers and the sponsors here today, from Chatham to Fresh Desk, and you'll see Higgy and Solar Insight, Cambridge. They're all interwoven deeply, taking advantage of these trends.
I'd be happy to go through Chatham Financial. I'm not going to bore you right now. Catch me in a break. I'd be happy to explain more. What we did also want to leave you with, and we know we've just got 5 minutes, there's going to be a sprint to the finish, but something that's practical as well. So once you've got your idea, once you've thought about the trends and how those trends are going to play into the success of that idea, you need a building block. You need a way to build your business. And this is a long list, but I was able to make it spell successful, so I thought it'd be fun. And look, you're not going to have perfect information. I mentioned that earlier. You're going to have to start somewhere, and you're going to plug in assumptions where you need to, and your job as an entrepreneur is going to be testing those assumptions. You figure out the 3 or 4 most important ones, and you try to prove them wrong so you can stop, kill the idea, and move on to the next idea. That'll save you a lot of time, heartache, and money. But the first one is, and I'm going to use the cheat sheet so we can move fast if you don't mind, size of the market. So here in size of the market, you want to think about number of people, number of businesses that are facing a situation or your problem is going to solve. Really, you want to think about 2 things. One is, what's the cost to them today? And then most importantly, what is the cost going to be to them tomorrow? American hockey player Wayne Gretzky, I think was Canadian born, but he was for the LA, always talked about passing the puck to where the person is skating to. And that's why he became the greatest hockey player. So when you think about size of market, think about that. Where it is today, because you got to live today, and where it's going tomorrow. In terms of uncertainty, this is around figuring out what is new and what is unproven in your idea. What are the things that you don't know, right? You have to figure out what you don't know, and then make some key assumptions around there. You try to eliminate the uncertainty and the unknowns as much as you can. Elon Musk, I have mixed feelings about what he's been able to do, to be blunt. But one of the things I absolutely admire is he recognized very early on that he would be much more successful, he had a higher chance of success, by using existing battery technology and existing battery capacity in his supply chain to make his cars go. I thought that was a brilliant insight. So eliminate some of the uncertainties as early as you can. Okay. As far as customers go, obviously you think about the segments, who you're going to serve, and the value proposition that you are going to present to each of those. And it will be different for each segment. But the key thing that I think a lot of folks are starting to rightly focus on today is to understand the relationship basis that you're going to have with those customers. And that means also what channel. Some folks are going to want that relationship based upon meeting them virtually, meeting them in a physical location, etc. So thinking through those things. And one more, and then I'll pause to see if you want to add anything to be, is the other C is the competition. And it's the competition today and also tomorrow. And really thinking about what is their likely action or reaction to you joining. Some of the best technological breakthroughs have come about because of somebody had an inferior version of a product, but it was much more focused and applied to a very small segment. And the big guy just didn't care. Just let it go. And before they knew it, you applied that and became the dominant player of a very specific piece of business, and then you found a way to extend that to the next piece of business. It's one trick that's been used countless times. But competition is there from day one. Don't assume you're the only one. If you think you're the only one, you haven't looked hard enough. It's a given in life, it's competition. Anything on the first 4 there?
No, I'd like to get through this so we can kind of get people's feedback. So
okay, then I'll keep going. If you guys okay with that? Mm-hmm. All right, I know you're hungry. Entry barriers. Okay, so these are today and tomorrow. So what you want to think about in terms of entry barriers, at the beginning you have the entry barriers, right? So you got to think about what are my capabilities, or what are the capabilities I need in order to be successful and go forward. And then those actually become the ways that you can block or create barriers to those that follow you. So think about entry barriers as your friend. It's a challenge at the beginning, but it is the thing that can make you successful. Right now, for instance, just to give a sidebar, it is very, very difficult now to get a license to be a real estate broker in the state of Illinois. It's some of the most stringent requirements. The pass rate is the same as the CFA level 1 to be a real estate broker. We haven't seen this play out yet, but if those things hold true, we could start seeing a shortage of quality and qualified real estate brokers in the next 5 years. That's a great business to be in. It's hard to get into right now. You got to pass that test. Suppliers. Think about suppliers. Now we're in a startup mindset, right? So some of this stuff sounds MBA-like, but it's different when you're a startup. Suppliers, when you're a startup, is both labor and materials, right? So in this sense, you want to think of that as thinking through what do I want to outsource, in other words, find partners for versus in-source, build myself. And then you have to even think about things, and I'm sure people later on today will say this more eloquently, think about things like contractor versus permanent hire, right? So think of labor suppliers as sort of one of the things we've got to solve for. Substitute products, this is where you think about what are the other ways that this problem can be solved. It's not exactly the same thing as competition. This is around single feature options versus sort of a grand solution, a physical versus a virtual, and a basic versus premium. Like for instance, an iPhone is actually a solution that's basic. iPhones are 2 generations behind technology. They came out because they could master the more basic, easier, user-friendly version of what was the state-of-the-art technology. And that's versus, say, a Starbucks, which is the premium version, right? We know that when we pull out our wallet each time. Finances, obviously, it's going to be a big deal. So you have to think in terms of investor value proposition, right? Not just your customer's value proposition. That is really the key. So even if you're bootstrapping, it is a very good discipline to think as if you were going to go in front of that VC for a pitch. Okay, so you want to be thinking things obviously in terms of the amount of money you're going to need, how the capital structure is going to work. What is your revenue model? Are you subscription basis? Are you a one-time fee? What is the recurring versus new dollars? What's your cost structure? And what is your cash cycle? A lot of jargon. If you're not familiar, find a partner that is. But remember, at the end of the day, cash pays the bills. Cash pays the bills. Upside. This is fun, right? People think about this, I think, prematurely, and this is what you fall in love with in your idea. Wow, if we do this, and then we multiply it by every country in the world, and we then multiply by the exponential growth of the population in the world, holy cow, right? We're the first trillionaires. Okay, it's smart to think about scalability, absolutely, because as you start to scale, you're going to actually create a barrier to your competitors. That's almost more important than anything else when you think about scalability, is how to reduce your costs faster than your competitors can react and try to catch up to you. But then also you want to think about extendability at this stage. So extendability is taking what I'm going to build that's going to require a capability, for instance, and I'm going to extend that capability to other things that I can do as a business. Or I'm going to take a product and extend to a different geography, or take a geography and extend my products. So think about extendability. And the lifespan, again, my editorial, I think it's really important to realize where you are at in your life stage and think through the key milestones there, from planning through launching, exploring, exploiting, transforming. But always think exit. That's my advice. When you're building your multi-year plan, think like you're the VC and you're looking to have your day. And you can get to that moment and then decide to keep going, and I'm gonna ride this thing for the next 30 years. But I think that's the way you build an urgency and accountability in yourself, even at the smallest moments. And I know we're long, but
5 minutes.
5 minutes? Perfect, thank you. Navaid, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, and then we'll basically, so maybe ask them if you could go back to the biggest problems. So we've talked about trends, we've talked about the type of things that are impacting everybody, and so maybe we can think about where do we want to focus our programming for the next year, right? So think about these trends that are impacting us and their implications. When we talked about there's this deciphering truth, empathy gap. We've seen how trust has been able to evolve, but this truth and empathy, technology hasn't been able to touch that. You can see all of this vitriol and all of this stuff rising. So maybe show of hands on different aspects, and then we'll go into some of these trends, and just basically from that, your feedback, we'll be able to focus our program.
How about can we do it this way? Let's say, show of hands, folks that think that you want to dive in just generally into further discussion on just trends themselves. You want to learn more about trends. And so that's about 40%, 50%. Okay, great. How many are interested in learning more about some aspects of the successful sort of methodology, if you see it? Oh, yeah, about the same. Okay, so both. All right. So do you want to go through each of those trends and ask if we want to, or should we as an organization sort of bundle up these pieces and make them quicker? Yeah. So why don't we take this moment and just see if there's anybody that wants to ask a question.
Yeah.
I have a question. You in the trends, I don't know if you categorize that under trust, but I hear you talk about blockchain or anything along those aspects that are showing up.
So the question is, in trust, we've not talked about blockchain. Absolutely, that's a great question. Blockchain is definitely an innovation that extends trust. So basically, it's a decentralized ledger that allows individuals to transact and create a public transaction record and allow for entire distributed group of institutions to evolve and emerge. It could be a tool, or that type of technology could further banking and many different types of transactions, because it just creates a very transparent way for transactions to occur. Now, do I think this specific existence of blockchain technology is the solution? No. And the reason, and so something like that could prevent, let's say, the DDoS attack that has been taking out the internet. You guys have not heard, because there's centralized DNS servers that have been taken down. If there was something like a blockchain DNS service, then it would be distributed. But problem is, if more than half of the servers that are putting information into blockchain are false, then it could actually take over blockchain. So, but
here's where it gets cool. So it's a great question. Blockchain, you can think of blockchain as actually a combination of these trends. You could also, if you wanted to, put it under the connectivity, right? So if you think about the internet, the initial internet was about instantaneous transfer of information, right? And then that's become ubiquitous. Internet of Things is is sort of leveraging that. Blockchain is the beginning of what is going to be called the Internet of Value. And we're going to find a point in time, not too distant, of maybe 5 years, maybe a little longer, where we're going to have instantaneous transfer of value, which will eliminate a lot of the inefficiencies, the friction in international banking. It'll eliminate a lot of the ways the bad guys can get in there and launder money and hide money that they've gotten through ill-gotten gains. So I would say, blockchain would be connectivity primary. That's taking advantage of computing, some AI in there, and it's I believe being driven a lot because of this global as well.
Globalization.
Good question.
2 more questions, and then please.
Can I just ask without the mic? Is that okay? I don't know. Right quick, I saw something. We study a lot of sustainability, reducing the carbon footprint. You have this, and we study a lot globally, actually. So, what is your comment about reducing the carbon footprint, and what are you seeing in the environment?
So, a very good question. So, just 2 weeks ago, there's a news I saw. Among all the news going on about the election, it somehow got missed. I think it's one of the biggest news of this decade, possibly. I read it with Al Jazeera. Okay, this science breakthrough in the U.S. on this scientist from Minnesota has basically figured out how to use a very 2-step process to take carbon dioxide and convert it into ethanol. So when the chemical bonds from ethanol and hydrocarbons, when they get converted into water and carbon dioxide and sometimes carbon that gets thrown into the atmosphere, that releases energy, and that energy enables us to do all sorts of things. Now, if you could take and reverse that transaction, it's actually really complex and it just uses too much energy and there's too many steps. And these guys have been able to do it with 2 steps. And if this is able to scale commercially, and it has potential because it's so simple, you could have all of this cheap energy from solar power coming, and it's impossible to store because you need very large batteries. Well, if you could connect it to this technology, you could take carbon out of the air and water and convert it into a storage form of energy. It could reverse this carbon problem and provide the storage for the renewable energy. So potential for mass disruption on that front.
So we warned you at the beginning it was going to be fast. It went very fast. We don't want to keep you from lunch any longer, but encourage you as members of Open to provide the feedback. Let us know where we can take this dialogue, and then we'll give it the time that it deserves to answer and to connect and gain, because I'm sure there's a lot of great information and ideas out there as well. Thank you for your attention.
As a closing sentence, what I'd like to say is that what entrepreneurship allows us to do, and this was basically meant to inspire you, put up some challenges, grand challenges that are facing humanity, and when talent, energy, and passion comes together, and it's focused on solving problems, then magic can happen. And that's what we're hoping, that even one spark out of this group can just uplift us and provide a very positive example to the community in the US as well as globally. Thank you.